system of education that I've devised in my latest book, Angel Education, is based on whole person health and happiness. And it's a win-win consciousness. That is, there's no such thing as failure, there's just another learning opportunity. And children can be allowed to find that exciting because it's like eternity, forever expanding. And so there's always another step in learning. You will never complete it. But happiness, because the energy is so fantastic and creative, happiness is the quickest way of being a success and finding your own personal power. My ideal school probably won't be called a school, it'll be called a learning centre. Because if we all come in as modest learners with love in our heart, you may have seen the exercise I do, it's always about opening the gold, opening the treasure chest inside us all. Golden head, open, healing hand. So my ideal school would be asking for the parents and of course the teachers to agree to modes of learning that are love-centered. So they're person-centered rather than system-centered. That means maximizing individuality. Because I like teasing you, and I like riddles and I like puzzles, I often ask you questions that you don't expect. Some of them I've already asked. Debbie, would you choose somebody to peel this for me?
Yeah.
Let me peel it! Let me peel it!
Don't squeal, please.
It's not white. It's
All right. There we are. So now, if this is a pretend,
the banana's real.
A pretend orange, what's the difference between these two that I'm giving out here?
Banana. They're real.
The first thing we look at is to see whether the teacher's eyes are bright and sparkly, because it's that. It means energy, it means enthusiasm, it means being optimistic. And children are all of these things. They're energetic, they're optimistic, and always in the moment. To steer them away from the moment, because the world can't bear that, and systems won't tolerate that, that for me is part of the challenge of how to get this complementary system mode of education based on whole person health and happiness in a way that is in harmony with the system they need to go through. But if they've got more self-esteem and more creativity, like, are you bored in school, darlings? Oh, you are. Do you want to take responsibility for it? Oh, you don't. Or might you? And if so, you know, it's your decision. Everything's their decision. Now, how can our blessed teachers become so hypersensitive without feeling they're going to lose their job, like a maths teacher I've just heard in a private school up north, because he didn't know how to discipline the children? For me, that's not the central question, how to discipline them. My central question is, how do you love them? And we can only love within the consciousness of our own love of ourself, our higher self. Not love of the mortgage, not love of the 2 cars, not love of the holidays, but actually loving the individuality of that child. I teach philosophy to 4-year-olds. I do not teach it. I share it. I allow it. A benign invitation education rather than a malign imposition. And we want to ask some really interesting, puzzling questions about shapes and sizes. If you think that everything has a shape, does the imagination have a shape? You think so? Okay. Now, because you're the older children, you need to give me reasons for things. So if you think imagination has a shape, it's a very difficult question. So I really would look for an answer that is very interesting. See, thank you. I knew you were. I could just see it like a little bud waiting to open in the sunshine. Right. Aggie, has imagination got a shape?
Yes.
And what makes you think so?
Because when I fall asleep, I always have an imagination, and it's always in a kind of bubble shape.
So you allow it. And where you have cooperation instead of competition, you find that goodwill and creativity, especially creativity, for me that's the key, creativity across the curriculum, where you have people enjoying themselves, then you don't need discipline. And places like Somerville have proved this, the school whereby you don't have to go to class. And there are others, blessed schools, in other countries too, not just here, whereby this human approach, based on a real deep understanding of humanity, is put into practice. Discipline comes from the word disciple. Education in this country also comes from the Bible, broadly speaking. It started because the workers in the mills and the like and in the mines were thought to be better people if they could read the Bible. So we can't get away from religiosity. I think more and more people are pulling away from religiosity and going to spirituality. No matter how woozy or unfocused it is, there is implicit in more and more people, and especially indigo children, if you've heard of those, they are very, very intuitive. And if you care to look at some of this film, you'll see how already the children are illustrating that. They are working on far more dimensions than just the mental left brain, mechanistic, literal rather than lateral. And if you have a holistic education, both sides of the brain need to be operative, in balance. Again, we hear about a balanced diet. We have apparently a broad and balanced curriculum. I challenge it. I don't think it is. The best form of discipline is always self-discipline. Have you noticed that a happy person doesn't need to be chastised? Have you noticed that a healthy person has energies that they're willing to use in a way that is useful for themselves first, without being selfish, ideally? Because unfortunately, imposed discipline nearly always makes people selfish because it's not cooperative, let alone democratic. So I am not comfortable ever, and many of the children aren't these days, although they put up with it, they endure it rather than enjoy it. Imposed discipline is a form of coercion. Coercion, I suggest, is against the divine law, because we have free will. So it will fail. You were teasing each other like with guesswork here. How did you feel when you didn't get it right? Did you not mind? Or did you mind? You didn't mind.
Because most people, they wouldn't, some of the children in my class, they would be quite annoyed when they didn't get something right.
And you're not one of them? Okay. And does that make you feel okay? Or would you rather be like the other people in your class?
It makes me feel okay.
Isn't that brilliant? Now is one of my favourite words. Why? Because most education isn't in the now. It's either fearful about people in the future not passing the relevant exams or what they think relevant, or they're memorying stuff that's in the past. So education, as practiced traditionally, is hardly ever in the moment. Children, they're in the moment. And one of the marvellous things about working with children is to watch how they can sense what they need from moment to moment. And that's why the word boredom comes in so much to traditional education, because they're not allowed to be in the moment. Now that has its own problems, but they're challenges. And if adults who are caring for these children really care for them, they'd find more creative strategies whereby the whole of the teaching regime, and that sounds a horrible word, but anyway, the lessons could be so arranged that the children negotiate with the adults and it's a shared experience. Did I ask her to make this shape?
No.
Did she choose to make that shape? She did. Is it better that she chose to make her own shape, or was it better that I told her first what to do and then she did it? William?
It's better that she chose to make that shape by herself.
Okay, and that fits in with what you were telling me earlier about children having more choices to make rather than always being told what's to do and what's to write, and they feel bad if it's so-called wrong. Because you may have noticed in today's classes how excited they were when they were left on their own. And how long could they be left alone? And then some of you may have noticed how indeed they were initiating their own learning. Now, how do we make that accountable? Do we want to make it accountable? That is the challenge. Unfortunately, standards and standardization get confused. So what actually happens is that people feel unless they conform to a standard that is not negotiated but imposed, then these children have failed. Now Grace immediately took out shapes and sizes. They were like that. And Grace, you show me, or show the class, will you, how you put it down. And that made a what shape?
Star.
A star shape, yes. If you actually look at these shapes here, who's to say that to put all of them like that is right, and that what Grace did is wrong? You see, the organic approach does need much more time than the traditional one, which is usually steered, dragooned into small time frames where people have to hit deadlines. Hit, what a negative word. Deadlines, not lifelines, deadlines, another negative word. What have we got to do today, sir? If you look at the language in the staff room and in the playground, you'll see most of it is negative. We would like to reverse that. And this mode of education is helping to do that. If you want me to be really outrageous, when I was in secondary school, every time a window was smashed with a brick, I cheered. I said, oh, more ventilation at last, more fresh air. The children are walking their talk. If we actually understood those refuseniks, and they are growing in number at every level of education, 15% of university people are dropping out now. Who is actually caring enough to do research that is open-ended enough rather than wanting to comply to what the system apparently still needs? Nobody is doing that because honesty is feared, truth is feared. Whenever anything went wrong in the 4 schools I was at, the covers up, we were almost begged by head teachers to lie so the press didn't get hold of the wrong end of the stick. Meditation taught in school happened in one headline where I was at. I won't say the town. And everyone was in the jitters. Meditation taught at school, in case certain people who thought that was the devil's work would in fact get the school into trouble. The head teachers can only survive by no black marks against it. So in order to keep this apparent image, glossy image, pristine, they will lie. Just as politicians are being said more and more to lie in order to defend an image that is basically indefensible. It is a complementary mode of operating. The complementary forms of therapy and medicine are on the increase despite global attempts for the drug companies to, as it were, dumb us all down by not looking at the cause of what's wrong, but blanketing it or masking it. So what's wrong with education is not, in my view, if you agree with me that something's wrong with it, the children often do, then instead of dumbing it down, let's ask, can complementary modes of learning help them in the classroom, the traditional classroom, to pass those exams which everyone seems to think are absolutely necessary for success in life, except the people who are very successful. So, which is the Mr. and which is the Mrs.? Grace?
Mr. Mrs.
Yes, and do you have a reason for that?
Because that one's hard and that was soft.
So hard and sparkly, like a peacock's tail or whatever. And this one's soft, you say. Have you felt it? Because you called it a stone. Is it a soft stone?
It's smooth.
It's smooth. Okay, so smooth and soft often get confused. Now, could James come out here? So this is a complementary approach and should not therefore threaten. I prefer the word complementary rather than the word alternative for that very reason, because we all need benign bridges between what is, and indeed some of these children, even in this Saturday school, do require, it would seem, a more traditional way of learning. That is, being told what to do, how to do it. To enjoy your own free will is to actually to enjoy your own God-given creative energies. They are plants. Now, if you want to be amazed by, they are, excuse me, they grow in the Arizona desert, and there is where it came off the stem. And if you look at the female as well, you'll also see a flat bit there, so they grow on the stem like this. And creativity is energy. It produces more energy, and it produces more enjoyment, and with more enjoyment and more energy, you get more good health. And I'd ask you people listening to analyze how much ill health there is in education at the moment. The last school I was at, a secondary school, there were 9 teachers off permanently ill every day for almost every month. Something wrong? Illness is telling us there's something really wrong. It's usually stress-based, fear-based, and based on those people who want, I would suggest, control for their own purposes, not actually finding out what the children really need, what their gifts are in life, what their talents are, what their passions are. You can teach anything, as I've proved in secondary school, through their passion. And if their passion is football, that can be an enormous learning mode right across the curriculum. So my plea, even then, was creativity across the curriculum. Unfortunately, most teachers have not enough trust in themselves to be creative. Teaching secondary school, I used to say, I don't mind whether you pass the exams or not. It's not my job to mind. My job is to care about my teaching, to do it as well as I can. Your job, if you so choose, is to pass. And that approach, giving them that latitude of free choice, actually meant that people like me get far better results. If you actually think what makes a person alive, what makes a tree alive, what makes the world beautiful and useful, is everything that is nourishing. So all the time I try to use images that are, or have within them, universal principles. Now, what are the universal principles as we sit here? Light, inwards and outwards. Sound, in the beginning was the word, and the word was the sound. So the building blocks of creation would seem to be sound and light. And therefore, they're all different aspects of energy. So I have always used things like color, as in the rainbow, the scale of music, 7 again, and making concordance between these apparently disparate aspects of being alive, but then getting the magic of seeing how they do harmonize. So the good education always leads to more harmony. And if it's Socratic in its approach, that is, you're inducing it out of the learner, not imposing. It's not mug and jug. It's actually allowing them to be their own guide to some extent, under guidance, firm but flexible guidance, to become their own guide to what they need to learn in this particular lifetime. In one of my books, Soul-Centered Education, there are many quotes from children that I've taught here that illustrate their implicit spirituality. By implicit, I mean it's inbuilt. One 7-year-old put his hands on his fist and said, "How do you know you're not the center of the universe?" All spirit is a matter of energy at different levels again. I asked them today, is it possible that you could imagine something that isn't true on one level or another? Now, the fact that they weren't able to give me a sophisticated answer to that, and sometimes they give very surprising answers to this, doesn't greatly bother me. It would bother a traditional educator because they'd think, oh gosh, they haven't learnt anything. In a way, do you think if you stand and reach as high as you can possibly can, that that's the highest you can go? Just an answer, yes or no. Grace, you were the first up. Do you think it's possible, if you reach as high as you can go, it's possible to go higher? Yes or no?
You can't go higher.
Then you've already gone. What do you think, Aggie? Could you or
Yes.
couldn't you? You think you could. So we've got two different views. Do you have a view, Alice?
Yes, you can.
You think you can. You can go higher than you think you can go. Oh, you're not sure. Okay, that's brilliant. Not sure is very wise. Maybe you can only work out something whether it's true or not by experiencing it. So if you reach as high as you can, as high as you really can, and then you measure it in the air and don't move afterwards. Right, have you gone as high as you can? Yes, okay, and then you relax that, but you keep that still then, please. Quickly now imagine yourself going 2 or 3 centimetres higher. Just see it in your mind's eye going higher, higher, higher. Up you go with Alice. And most people got higher. Yes, absolutely did. So good education is rather like, should we say, it's a garden full of buds, and you bring in the sunshine and enough water, showers, rain, call it what you will, and then all the buds begin to open joyfully because they know it's a good environment to be in. The child implicitly is in bud. The adults, hopefully, will be the sunshine and the showers, and the school, the garden. I actually devise ways of being creative across the curriculum. I decide there's not one subject that cannot be taught creatively. Whether or not it passes exams is the moot point. It really is. And I don't resist those people who think that exams is the only record of achievement. However, I do find it sterile. I find it too paper-centered. I find it, as with nurses these days, who are looking at paper all the time and paragraphs and text all the time and not looking at throbbing individual patients. You know, that's the way the world's going at the moment. And it's getting too mechanistic because of it, and you'll get more stress, more fear, and more unhappiness because of it. God help us, unhappiness. So why should all the lovely things in the world, through control of those people who think they know better than us and better than children who are often so wise, as these classes I show illustrate, why should they be the winners? So I was almost physically pained by what was happening to the children in secondary school, and therefore my love, a word that's often not used in the classroom, but my love for truth and children and the child alive in myself, enthusiasm too, got me into modes whereby I just wanted to, for my own survival's sake, to produce ways that were more engaging. You know, so my first book, Dovetails, which was all about integrated teaching. Everything can interlink with everything else because I think universally it does anyway. So there's a universal that can then be made personal. So Dovetails, the first book I wrote was maths. Why? Because I failed maths at school. And then I thought, why should I believe their idea of failure? So how can I help all those folk, so many of them, who find maths and calculations frightening? So the subtitle is More Fun, Less Fear. And this brings us back to the energy of fun, creativity, and more free will. For those people who believe in God, and God is love, and God gave us free will, then why are mankind always taking it away from learners? Don't we learn by making choices best? Don't we learn that there are certain laws within the universe of creation, of cause and effect? And when you're in harmony with the laws of creation, you're in harmony with your own life and your own needs, and you feel nourished and begin to experience many miracles in your own life, like synchronicities, so-called coincidences, etc. And the buzz that children get when they realize there's some part of them that knows what they need to know And it doesn't happen until they have that belief without a dogma, without a constraint, and they suddenly realize, experience is the key. Direct, hands-on experience. Less paper, more people, happy people, working together in ways that nourishes one and all. When I was in secondary school, we had what they called open evenings, and we'd meet the parents. What I noticed was the huge difference in the way the mother or the father, or both ideally, were describing the child and their behavior at home and what I was experiencing in the classroom. I couldn't believe, and neither could they quite often, it was the same child. This led me eventually to doing family forums, whereby the parents, again, possibly two, not always, because there's a lot of single parents around now, and the children all doing a workshop together based on the universal principles. And it was a revelation to these parents how incredibly wise these children can be, but they hide quite often from their parents. The true self, the imaginative self, the spiritual self, often they do not share with parents for lots of reasons, and I'm not going to say what they are. But I would ask parents to ask themselves, do I actually know my child on enough levels? We talked earlier about a multi-dimensional approach to learning. Each human being is soul and therefore multi-dimensional. If they don't have a multi-dimensional approach to learning, then already they're shrinking. And surely the best of education is always expanding through understanding. You asked earlier about discipline. By self-discipline, that is through self-enjoyment, through self-creativity, into self-esteem, and therefore, wow, the world is their oyster. And people who allow dreams to come true, their own personal inner dreams to come true, are people who have learnt how to manifest from the imagination what they need in their life, and hopefully without ego, modes of living that help the whole of the planet. There are more and more people these days who are uncomfortable in school, whether or not they're disabled in any sort of way or have learning difficulties. And that might be to do with racist or sexism or whatever, all these different things where people want to be different but daren't be. Until they actually relish being different, they will not express their personal power. If they don't find, express and enjoy their own personal power, then it'll get poisoned. And what will happen then? Then they'll go round them back and they want to have drugs to give them power. Or they want to have sex to give them power, so it's personal. So how do you get personal power into a way that helps the whole? Simply by realizing it is essential for health that people feel powerful and not poisoned by the system. Now, they may allow it. And in philosophy, all the time I say, do you want to take responsibility for your boredom in class or your bad behavior or not? Yeah? And the quicker we can all take responsibility for our own attitudes and our own behavior, then the quicker we get into self-empowerment. Self-empowerment without ego that wants to win all the time. So just to sum up, the system of education that I've devised in my latest book, Angel Education, is based on whole person health and happiness. And it's a win-win consciousness. That is, there's no such thing as failure, there's just another learning opportunity. And children can be allowed to find that exciting because it's like eternity, forever expanding. It's always another step in learning. You will never complete it. But happiness, because the energy is so fantastic and creative, happiness is the quickest way of being a success and finding your own personal power.